Alright, it's time for that all-important first guess forecast. This is Aaron DeBruin, Vinyl Freak 89 from the Eastern U.S. Weather Forum. And we're getting closer and closer to the March 1st through 3rd event, and I like where the models are trending. As you'll see in my forecast, I'm hesitant to call it a HECS yet, but certainly a MECS for the entirety of the I-95 corridor. We'll get there, but I'm going to analyze what's going on and why I think that we still could have some minor corrections in the models, but overall things are falling in line quite nicely. Alright, this is the current depiction as of 19Z, the 0-hour ruck. And let me explain why I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around this first wave idea. It might end up being correct, but I still think it's going to be more just warm air advection with the main system, as the Euro is showing at H5, although its surface reflection doesn't show that. I may be wrong, and it may be that our darn baroclinic boundary is so strong that as soon as we get a minor piece of vorticity to jump out to it, it just incites cyclogenesis. But we'll see. So here's the idea. First off, this piece in here is not what's running out in front. This is actually more associated with the severe weather that we have going on right now down in this area. This is going to lift up. Oops, this is going to lift up, get out of our way, and won't be a problem. The idea that the models have is that basically the jet is very strong in here. Okay, this is why we get the two-wave solution. The jet is very strong in here. So what it does is it carries all this vorticity in the subtropical jet, takes a piece of this, splits it off, and causes it to run out ahead of the system into here. And so what happens, you get low pressure that forms through Texas, as we're actually already seeing now, tracks up through here, and basically a piece splits off. As this piece of energy gets more split away and starts to phase into the trough and lift up, a piece splits off like this, so you get a double low solution like this. The main low is still sitting way back here, so you have a surface configuration that looks a little something like this in here. One low in here, one low in here, and sort of here's your main low, and you start to see like this little appendage sort of hanging out in front there. I'm just still hesitant to buy that. I'm starting to lean toward it, but I'm hesitant to buy it. Nevertheless, it still means with both of these waves, heavy QPF is going to get back, and even this first wave could deliver quite well, maybe 3 inches or greater in the I-95 cities. That is, if you buy the two-wave solution. Let me explain a little bit why I'm still hesitant to buy it. And that's because the NAM has been very inconsistent with trends. Here's 0Z last night. Clearly you can see the two waves. Wave 1 in here, wave 2 back here. Very well depicted. Also note, we're going to watch that 552 decameter line, because that's going to indicate where some of that phasing is going on. It's across central Lake Michigan. Let's move on to the 6Z depiction today. Look at that 552 decameter line. It's sunk south a little bit. Here's wave 1 a little bit further back. Wave 2 is a little bit further out ahead, and it's got this piece of vorticity in here. Oh, this bothers me. I do not see this. That could be the model feeding back on itself, but again, we'll see. Moving on through to 36 hours in here. I'm sorry, to the 12Z run today. You can see it disappears this, but it's got another piece of feedback energy, but definitely this wave's more out front. 552 is even a little bit further south. So it's trending closer and closer to that phase. So the first wave's really out in here, the second wave's back here, and it's moving this one ahead. My correction would be get rid of this whole thing, put the one main low right in here. That's what I still think is going to happen. I still just have problems believing this two-wave solution. I'm not saying it's not going to be correct. Now, here is the model that I'm buying the most at H5, although I still think it's got some issues at the surface, and that is the 12Z European. You can see, that's beautiful. Look at this H5 low over central North Carolina. My correction is, see, part of the reason why I don't like the European surface depiction is because it's got this out front, but it really doesn't have the upper level support for it sitting back here like the other models do. So my correction is take this, make this one big giant low, center it right in here, basically in between the two, and at this time you have all sorts of deformation snows going on throughout the entire I-95 corridor. It's crazy. If the European is right at H5, and assuming that this, which I think could be, I'll explain a little bit about the convective feedback issue later. Assuming that's wrong, this is a HECS for I-95. Okay, let's move on to the QPF map. I definitely think the Euro is underdoing QPF. Where it's printing out 0.25, I'd say that's closer to 0.75 or even 0.5 or 0.75 inch QPF all through here. That's beautiful deformation snows. And I like what it's doing with this band back here. I believe that basically we're going to have two axes of heaviest snows, and I've outlined this in my first guess forecast, but one sitting right in here, and the other one that goes through I-95, actually I'd push that a little bit south and east, and sits out through here. And I do think that the screw zone for the super heavy snows is right there in central Virginia, unfortunately. Alright, moving out to 84 hours. This is where you just, you can't get better from what you're predicting. You really can't. Remember, a couple days ago I said closed H5 low sitting over central Virginia just south of DC. The Euro totally buys that. Again, I think that this is wrong. I think that there's going to be more of a low sitting in here, and again, deformation snows to beat the band through here. And moving on to the QPF, it basically says, you're crazy. I don't believe this one bit. I'd say that, like I said, more of a low in here, and the heavy QPF sitting right along this corridor in here. Absolutely plastering I-95. And you can see the Euro goes and bombs this thing out. Here comes the low slowly lifting up. Again, if this is wrong, and I think that this is convective feedback issue, and I'm going to explain that in a second, and what we get is we get more of a low sitting in here, right across the benchmark, deformation snows ending in DC, extending up into Boston now, and needless to say, this is already 36 hours of heavy deformation snows. This is one heck of a long duration event. And the funny thing about this is the Euro actually agrees with me once we get out to 96 hours on that. It thinks that the heaviest band is going to be in here. Again, I think it's underdoing the QPF. Can't stress that enough. And this to me would argue that the low is sitting right in here. And here's why. Look at this big blob of 2-inch crap sitting out front. That's why I think it's convective feedback. You know, you sometimes see that kind of thing, but this is not a this is not a baroclinically forced system. It is frontogenically forced. There's a lot of lifting. The omega values are crazy through here, and we saw that as the RH values, and it just argues for more of a western solution. And you can see it just bombs the thing out, drops it in the lakes. Actually, I'd bring this a bit further south into here, but we'll see. That's kind of inconsequential at this point. Needless to say, it's going to get mighty cold. Okay, first guess map here. Now let me explain a few things. Again, I already outlined where the areas of heaviest snow is, so I don't need to go over it again. When making a forecast like this, I have to follow the model trends and say that the heaviest stuff is going to be in the cities in south and east. It's just, I can't say northwest of the cities are going to get hit as strongly. I have a gut feeling that they will, but that's not what I'm forecasting at this point. You can see my two areas of heaviest snow. One sitting down here and one right along the I-95 corridor in here. And my belief, as I outlined, it's 6 to 12 inches plus, which means it could be as low as 6, but I will be willing to lean towards more than a foot. I wouldn't, of course, I wouldn't actually issue that in a forecast, so that's why I'm saying it could be low, but it may end up being higher. So I leave you being the bearer of good news. One closed low, weaker front runner. Look at 12Z. Remember it had this double low solution? Look at 6Z. Same thing, although weaker. And also notice we are trending slightly ever more toward a phase. So that's all. First call update will be out this evening or tomorrow morning.